This is the story of a ruthless mafia heir and his flirtatious childhood sweetheart. No one would have expected that Shen Kuan, who wasn't even 10 years old yet, would win the little heir's favor simply because he knew how to tie shoelaces. From that moment on, he gained a clingy shadow who never left his side. It all began when Shen Chuan was sent to live with the Wen family. The mischievous boy trembled the moment he stepped into the household. The adults there all looked terrified, their faces scarred and fierce. Unable to bear it any longer, Shen Chuan wailed that he wanted to go home. But his father scolded him. From now on, this was where he would live. Shen Chuan shook with fear. The place was too frightening. He would rather return to his old bug-infested home. Just as his sobs hitched in his throat, a warm hand gently patted his head in comfort. The hand's owner then called for his own son. Wen Shihan, both of you are only children. From now on, live like brothers. Shen Chuan blinked in surprise, momentarily forgetting his tears. Before him stood a boy, obedient, handsome. The corners of his lips tilted upward, his expression as though he were always smiling even when silent. But as time passed, Shen Chuan discovered Wen Shihan was often gloomy. He liked hiding alone. In the garden, his father reminded him to get along with Wen Shihan. So with his shameless persistence and natural gift for making friends, Shen Chuan kept trying to draw the withdrawn boy out. Yet no matter how he invited him, Wen Shihan refused to play. At last, Shen Chuan's patience wore thin. Then, by chance, he noticed Wen Shihan's shoelaces had come undone. When he pointed it out, Wen Shihan admitted he didn't know how to tie them. So the lively Shen Chuan eagerly offered to help. In less than 10 minutes, the shoelaces were neatly tied. He stretched out his hand again, beaming. Tying shoelaces is simple. So, will you play with me now? The little heir gasped in amazement, eyes shining with admiration at the boy before him. From that moment on, Shen Chuan gained himself a clingy follower. Time passed. By the time they entered university, Wen Shihan's possessiveness only grew stronger, suffocating Shen Chuan. The boy was becoming weary of it all. One day, he shouted in frustration that he wasn't going home with Wen Shihan. He had plans that night. Wen Shihan's expression darkened instantly. A terrible suspicion stirred in his heart. He grabbed Shen Chuan urgently, demanding to know who the date was with. But Shen Chuan shook him off and snapped, "That's none of your business." Then, he strode out of the dorm, leaving Wen Shihan standing there, his face shadowed with a dark and dangerous look. The toothless man, covered in blood, knelt on the ground. It was yet another purge within the mafia. The cold-faced mafia heir stood before him. Yet his mind was elsewhere. A gnawing instinct told him his beloved was with someone else. With a flick of his hand, he gave his orders with chilling ease. Chop him up. Send the fingers to the rival Chincheng gang. The rest, sell it off to Blackstone. After issuing his commands, Wen Shihan's impatience betrayed him. Just then, his phone rang inside his pocket. He let out a cold laugh as he glanced at the screen. So, Shen Chuan wasn't coming home tonight. Instead, he was holed up at a hotel. It didn't take much imagination to guess what that bastard was doing. But what Wen Shihan didn't know was far worse than he imagined. During his first romance, Shen Chuan had been drawn into strange desires by his boyfriend. It was something he never dared confess, something he could never let Wen Shihan know. If Wen Shihan ever discovered it, surely he would find him disgusting. Later that night, Shen Chuan parted with his new boyfriend and returned home to finish his homework. Flustered and pressed for time, he nearly jumped when a hand patted his shoulder. Startled, he turned back. Wen Shihan had returned. The boy was dressed sharply in a suit, and Shen Chuan assumed he had come straight from some family banquet. Wen Shihan offered no explanation. Instead, he leaned in with eager warmth, asking what Shen Chuan was working on. When he learned it was an assignment, he suggested they work on it together, his demeanor no different from that of a carefree university student. A short while later, He changed clothes, only for Shen Chuan to notice that his shirt was inside out. He teased him for it, and Wen Shihan feigned realization, sighing dramatically. "If it weren't for you, I don't know how I'd survive." It was an act he had perfected. This image of helpless dependence, all to bind Shen Chuan, to make it impossible for him to leave. Annoyed, Shen Chuan urged him to get back to his assignment. Wen Shihan obediently bent over his work. But when he happened to glance sideways, his eyes fell on the faint red marks scattered along Shen Chuan's neck. Instantly, his gaze turned icy, his expression hard as stone. Oblivious, Shen Chuan kept rambling about his homework. But Wen Shihan could no longer hear a word. Was this supposed to be film analysis? Or bedsheet analysis? He turned his head toward Wen Shihan, only to see the boy watching with a perfectly blank expression. Chuan suddenly doubted. Was this guy even a man? Had he ever taken care of himself? For Xtek, thought made him glance downward. Wen Shihan's fingers were long and well-defined, exactly the type he liked. Shen Chuan's face burned red. What on earth was he thinking? Yet the movie kept playing, and the images on the screen made it impossible for him to focus on his homework. He felt like he was about to explode. Just then, Wen Shihan suddenly hit pause, pulled him close, and asked if he was reacting. Shen Chuan's face went pale. He immediately denied it. But Wen Shihan clearly didn't believe him. With a wicked smile, he said he'd help. Chuan thought he might burst into flames. He struggled to push him away, but was swiftly overpowered. In the chaos, he looked up with tears of frustration, only to find Wen Shihan's gaze fierce and predatory, like a beast guarding its prey. When everything was finally over, Shen Chuan, furious and humiliated, tried to leave. But Wen Shihan caught his arm. Before he could react, Wen Shihan tugged back his sleeve, gripping his wrist tightly. The marks on his skin spoke louder than words, a reminder with an unspoken threat. "You'd better be careful, or I'll be hurt." The air froze. Shen Chuan's heart pounded in terror, the sound of it echoing in his ears. The next morning, after a sleepless night of tossing and turning, he was in agony. Had Wen Shihan already discovered his secret? The thought unsettled him deeply. And worse, what had happened between them last night had gone far beyond friendship. How was he supposed to face Wen Shihan now? Just then, there was a knock at his door. Panicked, Shen Chuan opened it only to find Wen Shihan waiting to walk to class with him. The boy looked as if nothing had happened, asking with concern whether he'd slept in because he wasn't feeling well. Shen Chuan flushed, stammering something about last night. Wen Shihan narrowed his eyes, smiling slyly. "What happened last night?" he teased. Chuan's temper flared. Was this guy pretending to be clueless? Just as he angrily moved to shut the door, Wen Shihan asked casually, "So? Because I helped. You last night? You're acting this way today? Does that mean you actually care?" His relentless pursuit made Shen Chuan bristle. With a scoff, he snapped, "Of course not. I don't care at all." He turned away to grab his bag, missing the twisted smile spreading across Wen Shihan's lips behind him. "So he's angry," Wen Shihan murmured, eyes gleaming with sick delight. "How interesting." And so, the Mafia Prince laid down an invisible net, trapping him, making sure he would never escape his side. At that moment, Shen Chuan was venting to his classmates. He had switched through countless part-time jobs, each time dismissed within months, always without reason. This time, he had finally found another job. He swore he would treasure it. Yet, he had no idea that someone was pulling strings behind the scenes, making sure he never had the chance to become financially independent. After working all afternoon, he returned to campus exhausted. A classmate from the photography club stopped him, asking about an assignment. Curious about photography, Shen Chuan picked up the classmate's camera. As he browsed through the pictures, he was surprised to find so many of them were of Wen Shihan. It seemed Wen Shihan was quite popular at school. Then, he stumbled upon photos of Wen Shihan with himself. Shen Chuan froze. In every shot, the boy's gaze was strikingly familiar eyes filled with desire, with a will that promised possession. So, this was how Wen Shihan had always looked at him. Lost in thought, he suddenly heard a voice behind him. "So here you are!" Shen Chuan jumped in fright. It was Wen Shihan. The boy complained, "Why didn't you answer my calls? Are you still angry?" Before Shen Chuan could even respond, Wen Shihan suddenly seized his wrist, the one still marked with red traces, and slammed him down hard against the desk. Shen Chuan cried out in pain. And with his hidden masochistic tendencies, his face flushed crimson. Wen Shihan leaned close, his voice a whispered against his ear. "Then why do you keep avoiding me?" Flustered, Shen Chuan glanced at his classmate, only to see the student turn his head away in haste. Pretending not to notice the tension. Unable to endure any longer, Shen Chuan shoved him off, bolted upright, and ran from the classroom. The classmate looked on, bewildered. Did they get into a fight? But Wen Shihan only gave a playful glance toward the door and replied, "No fight. I was just bullying him. One-sidedly." With that, he picked up the camera. "Good camera. Does it work well?" The classmate thanked him sincerely. Only then did he realize this professional-grade camera had been a gift from Wen Shihan. Immediately after, Wen Shihan's expression darkened, his tone sharp with command. "Then keep following Shen Chuan." This time, Mafia Prince Wen Shihan was dealing with a traitor. The battered man collapsed on the ground, begging desperately, insisting he knew nothing. Wen Shihan lightly patted the man's face, warning him to behave. After all, his spies were everywhere. Then he kicked the man to the floor, ordering his subordinates to make him sign an agreement. The man trembled as he read the contents. Just as he opened his mouth to beg again, Wen Shihan grew impatient. "Help him out," he ordered coldly. "Just don't kill him." Moments later, the decrepit building echoed with screams that tore at the walls. When all was finished, Wen Shihan stood in silence, staring down at his bloodied hands. The warmth of it brought back memories of holding the one he loved that day. He had wanted to take things further, to be the last person touching him. The thought made his grip tighten suddenly. He no longer wished to suppress his hunger. Then his phone rang. Glancing at the message, he gave a humorless chuckle. His beloved Shen Chuan was out on a date with another man again. His lips curled as he muttered to himself, "Chuan? Where should I lock you away?" He dialed the number, intending to confront him directly. Meanwhile, Shen Chuan was playing cards with his new boyfriend. The phone buzzed endlessly. The pretty white-haired boy grew annoyed, picked it up, and saw the caller ID. Wen was Shen Chuan's new lover? With a sly smirk, he answered the call and tossed the phone onto the bed. He didn't know that this thoughtless move almost cost him his life. On the other end, Wen Shihan listened in silence, hearing every sound through the phone. His fury burned like fire, but his face remained frozen, icy. When a subordinate came to report, Wen Shihan silenced him with a raised hand. Not a sound was allowed. The only thing that mattered now was the voice on that line. The next morning, after a sleepless night, Shen Chuan dragged himself out of bed. Half asleep, he shuffled into the living room. At once, someone handed him a glass of milk. He took it without thinking and drank. Wen Shihan, watching him, smiled darkly. "You're far too careless. What if I had put something in it?" At that, Shen Chuan jolted awake, clutching his mouth in alarm. "You didn't spit in it, did you?" he demanded. Wen Shihan laughed loudly. "No, just teasing. I wanted to wake you up." As he spoke, he reached out to gently wipe away the milk from the corner of Shen Chuan's lips. Infuriated, Shen Chuan swatted his hand away, cursing under his breath. But Wen Shihan only smiled, as if nothing had happened, continuing his playful banter. No one knew that a storm was quietly gathering between them. At that moment, he was leisurely drinking at a bar when someone suddenly called out to him. Turning around, he saw a young, strikingly handsome boy. Jung In Seok frowned in confusion and asked if they had met before. After all, with a handsome face, if he had seen him, he would never have forgotten. But Wen Shihan ignored the man's flirty words. Smiling slyly, he leaned closer and reminded Jung In-seok that just a few days ago he had answered his phone. Jung In-seok instantly flushed. A boy. This beautiful striking up conversation with him. He was overjoyed. Wen Shihan curled his lips into a smirk and beckoned him closer with a finger. Eagerly, Jung In-seok leaned in, only to hear a whisper in his ear. "Are you trying to die?" The next second, his head was yanked by the hair and slammed hard against the table. Wen Shihan's expression twisted. His eyes filled with a beastly gleam as he glared down at the frivolous man. Moments later, Jung In-seok was bloodied all over. In pain and fury, he demanded to know why the boy had attacked him. Wen Shihan's face darkened, his tone cruel, as though toying with prey. "Why don't you guess?" With that, he grabbed the man by the collar. Panicked Jung. In-seok begged for mercy. In his desperation, he suddenly remembered the night he had been playing cards with Shen Chewen, and how he had answered a call from someone saved as Wen. Clutching at the thought like a lifeline, he stammered out, "Was that call from you? You're Wen?" At those words, Wen Shihan narrowed his eyes and smiled. "So that's the nickname Chewen gave me. He's always this adorable." Though he was smiling, his fists only grew more vicious. Another brutal punch came, crashing down, and just then a phone rang. Wen Shihan picked it up. It was Shen Chewen calling Jung In-seok. He shoved the phone to the battered man's ear, threatening him to behave. Forced Jung. In-seok put on an act and answered the call. On the other end, Shen Chewen was asking to meet up. When the terrified man wanted to refuse, Wen Shihan ended the call for him. Jung In-seok was left utterly confused. Was he being forced to accept Shen Chewen's invitation? Hatred burned in Wen Shihan's chest. With a mocking smile, he thought, Shen Chewen always did have a talent for driving people insane. Meanwhile, Shen Chewen had no idea that he was about to fall right into Wen Shihan's trap with no chance of escape. That afternoon, when Wen Shihan returned to the dorm, he found Shen Chewen quietly asleep. But he knew well enough. The boy would sneak out again at night for a secret date. Adjusting the sleeping figure. Wen Shihan's cold gaze fell on the faint. Red marks along Shen Chewen's neck. Only now did he realize the hidden side of the boy no one else knew. His hand closed around Shen Chewen's throat, and he sighed softly. You shouldn't have let me discover your weakness. Don't push me any further. By evening, Shen Chewen awoke, munching on an apple. From the bedroom, Wen Shihan stepped out, dressed meticulously. Shen Chewen eyed his unusual outfit with curiosity. Wen Shihan openly admitted he had an appointment that night. Shen Chewen misunderstood immediately. So Shihan's in a relationship now? He pointed out that Wen Shihan's collar wasn't straight. The boy fumbled awkwardly, unable to fix it. Helpless, comma. He moved closer. Shen Chewen, annoyed, scolded him. Don't come over. Fix it yourself. Yet, almost by instinct, he reached out and straightened the collar for him. The two of them, side by side, looked like an old married couple, moving in perfect sync. A moment later, Shen Chewen pushed Wen Shihan away, telling him to hurry off. But Wen Shihan solemnly urged him not to go out that night. Biting into his apple, Shen Chewen replied calmly that he had to go work another part-time job. Wen Shihan grew visibly agitated. Slamming his hand against the table, he demanded loudly, Why are you taking another job? If you need money, you can just ask me. Anger flared in Shen Chewen's eyes. I'm not a beggar. If I need money, I'll earn it myself. But before he could finish, Wen Shihan suddenly grabbed him, his voice low and fierce. After you save enough, are you planning to move out of here? The words stunned Shen Chewen into silence. Wen Shihan let go, storming out and slamming the door behind him. That night, Shen Chewen arrived at the hotel as promised. Confused, he stared at his boyfriend. "What happened to you? Who beat you up?" The man's face was bruised and bloodied. His eyes locked on Shen Chuan with silent fury. Startled, Shen Chuan stammered nervously. "What's wrong with you? Does it hurt that much?" Suddenly, the man seized his arm. Shen Chuan blinked, bewildered. "What are you doing?" The man hesitated, words stuck in his throat. Then, with sudden resolve, he threw Shen Chuan onto the bed. His wrists were bound tightly behind him. After finishing the restraint, the man left the room without a word. Shen Chuan, confused and struggling, had no idea what was happening. And just then, a different presence entered. A large hand clad in black leather pressed him down with overwhelming force. The ruthless mafia heir devoured his feast, lips smeared with oil, while Shen Chuan had already drifted into slumber. He dreamt of the time when they were only 10, when both he and Wen Shihan had been kidnapped. Back then, Wen Shihan had suffered brutal injuries just to protect him. Shen Chuan jolted awake from the nightmare, trembling, his hands fumbling across the bed. The moment he saw Wen Shihan, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. But something felt wrong. Why did Wen Shihan look like a child? Was he hallucinating? He pulled back the blanket to check, only to have his hand seized. The boy, half asleep, mumbled, "Why are you awake so soon?" Then he pulled him into a tight embrace. "Sleep a little longer." Shen Chuan's eyes widened in despair. He could hardly breathe under that crushing hold. The next morning, Shen Chuan examined the red marks scattered across his skin while furiously sending messages to his ex-boyfriend, demanding to know why he had betrayed him. He sent countless texts, but not a single reply came back. Frustrated, Shen Chuan wrapped himself up tightly, skipped breakfast, and prepared to leave for class. Just then, Wen Shihan, who had been preparing breakfast, suddenly called out, asking if his body was all right. Shen Chuan shot him a resentful look and snapped, saying he felt like vomiting and didn't want to hear a word from him. He flung the door open to leave. But Wen Shihan abruptly blocked the doorway. His overbearing stance made Shen Chuan falter. Reluctantly, he gave in, muttering that he would eat breakfast. But as for what happened last night, they should just pretend it never happened. By the end, his voice was barely audible. Wen Shihan stared at him coldly, then suddenly yanked up his collar. "That's impossible." "Forget it." "No way. Eat your breakfast. I'll take you to school afterward." He tilted Shen Chuan's chin up, his gaze carrying an unmistakable dominance that could not be denied. Moments later, when Shen Chuan arrived. At school, his misery deepened. Why did the photo shoot have to be held here of all places? His body shook uncontrollably as memories crashed over him. It was in a cave just like this, dark, damp, and suffocating, that Wen Shihan had been stabbed. While shielding him, the dim cavern swallowed him in fear, until Shen Chuan could no longer bear it. He doubled over, gagging violently. Under the shocked eyes of those around him, he bolted out of the cave, stumbling into a restroom where he collapsed into tears and nausea. But then, he caught sight of a pair of shoes behind him. Every nerve in Shen Chuan's body trembled. He already knew who it was. Sure enough. Wen Shihan stood there, his expression shadowed and dangerous as he asked coldly, "Why do you keep letting yourself become like this?" As he spoke, he hauled Shen Chuan up with one swift motion. Shen Chuan's emotions finally collapsed. Tears streamed down his face as he choked out, "I was wrong." Clutching at him like a drowning man grasping at the last straw, Shen Chuan sobbed desperately, "Tell me, what should I do?"